way. I'd like to begin by actually referring to a conversation that you and I once had in your room. And I'd like the congregation to hear it too, because there is an obvious reason for this. Just to help you recall that conversation, you and I were sitting there and you said that you had something you wanted to talk to me about, something I said in one of my sermons. And you had mentioned to me about the fact that I called myself a pacifist, and that I was for peace and not for war. And one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that it's a good way for me to lose a lot of people on Remembrance Day by saying statements like that. And I agreed with you, and I realized that because I myself was not in the war, then it just made it so that I couldn't understand other people's situation. But then you did something interesting, because I came back and we had another conversation, and you actually apologized to me for that, even though I thought I was coming more on your side, and then you ended up apologizing to me for saying what you did to me. But it's just a way of understanding between a Remembrance vet and a person who's never served in war before. My dad fought in the Korean War, and I remember when I was 6 years old, when he finally came back. He was injured in the Korean War. He came back home and he was never the same, and our family broke up. He turned to alcohol, and there was a lot of abuse going on in our family. And I think that a lot of it had to do with the issues that he had to deal with, but he never spoke about them. And he wouldn't share what happened over in Korea. One of the things that you began trying to share with me is what it was like for the people who served in the war to come home and then go to church, but not be able to really talk about their experiences and some of the things that they may have had to deal with that no one would understand or they could turn to talk about it. Would you like to just fill me in a little more, or share with me again what you shared with me in the room?
The sad thing about it is it hasn't changed. Not a particle. I want to show you. I said that when we come home from the war, I still say it, we never got over that war. It doesn't matter what we did since or who we did it with or anything. No veteran of the Second World War, or the First especially, which was worse, ever recovered from that. And when we got home, I said, and we still do the same thing, there was no understanding on either side of what we should do, because we were all rookies. The civilian population that had to receive nearly 1 million of us coming home was not prepared for that. They had been 5 years without us. We had lived in different countries, and we had also developed a culture of our own. First, you got to imagine what it'd be like from day one when you signed the check for Canada, which says pay to Canada and Canadians everything that I have up to and including my life. That was our side of the deal.
Sure.
The civilians that stayed home had to, we would have been nothing without the civilians, because we couldn't have eaten, we couldn't have worn clothes, couldn't have done anything.
Yes.
They fed us. And the women and men that were left home, and boys, and whoever, like Dan, that was turned down because he was a fisherman and they needed to fish worse than they needed the warriors, so he wasn't allowed to enlist. But he was just as much a veteran as the rest of us.
Yeah.
And when we came home, there was no understanding on either side because we'd been 5 years away and developed a culture of our own. You can't live together, a million people, with the same objective and taught the same thing. Didn't matter whether you were Air Force, Navy, or Army. You were taught to kill Germans anyway, however was possible. Just that was the enemy and destroyed it. We did that. So we came home and we knew then, and we've lived with it every day since, that we had blood on our hands, but we thought it was blood that was for the benefit of our people. Now, it was, but I expect if the Germans had won, they'd have said that blood was for the benefit of their people.
Yes.
So who's ahead here? Anyway, nothing ever comes of war except more war. And you say your father was in Korea. Well, there's 516 Canadian people that are still in Korea.
Yes.
And they will be there. So they never, when we first came home, there was no understanding. There was homes, nearly all the married homes broke up for the simple fact that the woman of the household had to assume all the responsibility of raising whatever family there was, all the responsibility of paying the bills, all the responsibility of keeping the house up, or whatever it was that where they lived or what they did. It was suddenly hers, and she spent 5 years doing it, and she couldn't understand why. So Yo-Yo would come home, who had been away, and come home and start taking over from her because she was the boss. And it was the same in all directions. We were promised the jobs we left. We had had service jobs or one thing or another. And the people, the day we left, somebody took our job and had been there for 5 or 6 years and built a life around that job. They wasn't there too happy to give it up because we come home. So what happened was we were lost. And we had developed this culture of our own. We didn't speak the language. We had a language of our own. And we didn't even know our own money.
Yes.
And the most unusual fear that I had all through the whole 4 years that I was overseas and at the end of it came home was the day I arrived in my little village where I lived. And I wondered what in the world I was doing there. I had moved there from well, I had been home a while and out in Kingston where all we did was lay in the sun. But previous to that, I had been outside London, outside Glasgow, outside Paris, outside anywhere you want to name, where people try to go and you can't. So I had no idea what I was supposed to do. And a million other people, men and women both, there were a few service women there. There was a lot of them, the WAFs and the quacks and whatever they called them, the waves. They were overseas too. But when they come home, we were lost. So the government was wonderful. We might have not thought so at the time. I suppose a lot of us don't think so yet. But they provided training schools. They provided money to go back to school like Owen did. And I have several friends I know that went back. And they provided farms for people, and the government was wonderful. And they wanted to get rid of us, but they were wonderful. And we appreciated then, and we appreciate still what's left of it. And I'm talking about World War I, or World War II. But we were lost. We didn't know where to turn.